What's good, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I'm glad to bring you the next verses in the series. This is a big one. We got the Elder Scrolls Online versus Final Fantasy 14. Now, for me, this one is kind of huge because there was a point where I was kind of conflicted and struggling between which of the two I should play. So, this is going to be for anybody who kind of wants to know the pros and cons of each of these games and how they stack up against one another. This video is going to be for you. I hope this helps you make a decision. So let's go ahead and jump into it. So a lot of you may have actually already heard about these franchises. Elder Scrolls and Final Fantasy tend to be one of the most recognizable franchises in the gaming industry. Just a little bit about these games. Final Fantasy 14 was released in 2013 by Square Enix, and the Elder Scrolls Online released back in 2014 by ZeniMax. So it wasn't Bethesda, but ZeniMax. Now they play a little bit differently than their single player counterparts, and I'm going to get into all of that. But the first thing I want to let you guys know is kind of the model when getting into both of these games. We'll go ahead and start with the Elder Scrolls. So the Elder Scrolls has a buy to play model. Generally, it's $20 or less for the base game. Everything after that is free. Now, the way they do things is a little bit different. So they pretty much give you three options. You can pay a subscription, buy the DLCs every time they come out, or try to play the base game without any of that, which is probably going to be bad for you. So basically, if you pay the $15 a month, you will get access to every single DLC pack that releases for the game. You will also get a couple of rewards like 10% extra XP. You get unlimited crafting bag space. You get crowns, which is premium currency for their shop, and a couple of other little things that you get with it. So if you don't decide to go that route and you would prefer to buy the DLC packs, the Elder Scrolls releases DLC packs like every quarter or every 3 months. Um, the packs can range anywhere between $10 to $20, and you have to continuously buy these packs every single time they come out, or you won't be able to access the content. So when you pay the $15, you get all of that for free. And the game has been out so long that there's so many DLC packs. If you don't want to pay that $15 a month, you're going to be shoving out like $300 basically up front just to make sure you have all the DLC for the game. Now you can try to play the game free. It's probably not going to work, so I'm not going to mention nothing there. Now, as far as expansions go, even if you pay the $15 a month, you still have to buy the expansions. The expansions come out around every year for Elder Scrolls, every year and a half, something like that. And they generally run $40, and that'll get you access to the expansion pack, whether you don't pay the $15 or you do. So that was a little bit about the model for the Elder Scrolls. And I'm sorry if you guys hear like some keys rattling. That's my dog. She's shaking herself off, doing all crazy things. But jumping into Final Fantasy 14's model, it's a little bit simple. It's actually very simple. It's just flat out $15 a month. You buy the game and $15 a month. There's no free to play option. There's nothing. $15 a month will get you access to every single thing in that game it has to offer, excluding an expansion. If an expansion comes out, you do have to buy the expansion. But every major update, every patch, every class, everything is going to be free in Final Fantasy 14, regardless. Now, the expansions for Final Fantasy 14 come out every 2 years. So you do have to buy the expansion. They generally run $40, and that'll get you access to everything new with the expansion. So that's pretty much the model of both games. I know when you're trying to find an MMO, you want to know what that model is going to kind of look like. So I wanted to get that out of the way first before we start comparing the games in detail. So the next thing we're going to go ahead and jump into, we're going to compare the worlds that you're going to be playing in. I think that's a big part of picking an MMO. So let's go ahead and see how these worlds stack up, and let's get to it. Now, let's talk about the world in Elder Scrolls Online first. The first thing I want to get off my chest is the world does have loading screens. That doesn't bother me too much. I am more of a seamless world type of person, but I found the world to be so beautiful in Elder Scrolls. The environments are lush, they're colorful, there's trees everywhere. I feel like there's a lot of interaction going on with the world. Each zone is very big, so there's a lot to explore. When you're exploring these zones, there's a lot of quests that you can just go and pick up and start. There's a lot of main storyline quests that you can pick up and start all over the zone. So a lot of the zones within that one large zone have a lot of main storyline quests that kind of make you feel like you're in the environment, you're in the world. You see NPCs everywhere. You see wild animals. There's trees you can go chop. There's water that you can go dive into. The world is very beautiful. There's a lot of things to do in the world. You have world bosses that you can go and kill. You got dungeons that you can go explore. You have delves, which are basically like single player dungeons that you can explore. And one of the greatest things about the world in Elder Scrolls Online is I feel like I always see somebody out questing. I always see somebody when I go into a dungeon, and then next thing you know, you basically partnered up with somebody to complete that dungeon. So the world has a lot to offer. Myself, I'm a completionist, so if you like completing every single zone, this would be the game for you. This would be the world for you, I should say, because there's literally a checklist with how many quests, how many shards have you collected, how many bosses have you beat, did you do all the dungeons in the world. So there's a lot to kind of discover, and there are a lot of zones in this game. I don't know how many offhand, but there are a ton of zones that you can go through, explore, and quest in. Now, the great thing about the world in the Elder Scrolls Online is that when you start your game, you are not stuck to one zone. Most MMOs, you kind of follow this tradition of when you create a character, you start in the same zone and you go through the same zones every single time. That's not something that you have to worry about here. You will start in a zone, but if you immediately want to leave that zone and go to any other zone in the game, you can. That's because the world actually caters to your level. So whatever level you are, the world is going to scale to it. That makes this one of the most enjoyable leveling experiences, and it it keeps the game from being redundant when you make a alt and you want to level up a different character because you may want to try a different class. So the world has a lot going for it. I just thought it would be very important to just to show off some of the world and what you can do in it, because I feel like when you have a game and all you do is sit in the main city of a game, it gets really boring. And Elder Scrolls kind of encourages people to go out and explore the world because there's so many collectibles and challenges that you can get and unique costumes that you can get just by being out in the world questing and doing different things. So next, we're going to go ahead and jump into the world of Final Fantasy XIV and see what that has to offer. Now, I might get a little emotional talking about the world in Final Fantasy XIV because it's just so gorgeous. It's so beautiful, but the world is just so empty. It feels like a wasteland. Like there's no interaction going on in the world. You got random enemies scattered about, but that's about it. The density of the world is very. It's just not there. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. There you don't see people out in the world questing a lot, unless it's like at the peak of a new expansion. There are side quests out there in the world to do, but there's not enough, or there's not as many as in like Elder Scrolls. Elder Scrolls, every time you turn a corner, there's another quest. One thing about the world in 14 is it doesn't feel alive. Like I said, there's no density, The zones look beautiful, but there's no NPCs just kind of walking around the zones. None of that. The only time you'll find NPCs are when you're in kind of like a major little town of that zone or the hub of that zone. That's the only time you're really going to see NPCs and other players. Final Fantasy doesn't really do a lot to incite you to go out in the world and do things. Only time you're going to be out in the world is if you're maybe mining or cutting a tree. You don't really see people out just questing. There aren't NPCs outside of the main hubs, in the zones. None of that. If I failed to mention, let me mention now real quick. Final Fantasy also does have loading screens in between their zones, so I thought that was important to mention as well. Those are really the downsides about the zones in Final Fantasy. Other than that, man, the zones are breathtaking. Final Fantasy gives you the ability to fly, so you do have flying mounts, and just to soar over the zones and just see it from up above, it's a great view. It looks really good, but once you get down below and you're on the land, you're like, man, it's really empty down here. A feature that Final Fantasy also added is the ability to dive underwater. So there's a huge ocean that you can dive under, and there's a little city, a hub under the ocean, which is, these are like breathtaking scenes almost. But once you're outside of that city that's under the water, there's nothing in the water. There's nothing under the water to explore. It's just empty space. And it's really unfortunate because I wish Final Fantasy would give people a reason to go and explore such a beautiful world that they've worked hard on. In this game, most people just sit around the main city. Like I said, because there's not much out in the world to do. And if you're out in the world, you're at the city in that zone, which is unfortunate because I feel like Final Fantasy is wasting a lot of potential in that area. So that's all I got on the worlds. Let's go ahead and jump into the meat of this debate or this versus, and that's the gameplay. All right, so now we're at the good stuff, the gameplay. We'll go ahead and kick things off with Elder Scrolls here. The first thing right out the gate that I want people to know about Elder Scrolls is the amount of freedom and customization they give. When you start up this game, you're creating your character for the first time, you're going to have 10 different races to choose from. The great thing about this is every race has their own passives. So, if you want your character to be a tanking character, you may want to start with something like a orc because they're going to get more bonuses to health, I believe, or heavy armor. It's one of the two. I can't remember. But all of these races have different passives, which give you different bonuses. And Elder Scrolls is a game where it's all about building up as many passives as you can to make your character stronger. Once you got your race pretty much figured out, you'll have 6 classes to choose from. You have Dragon Knight, Necromancer, Nightblade, Sorcerer, Templar, Warden. So the cool thing about picking these classes is that any of these classes can do any role that you want it to do. So if you want to tank, you can pick any of these classes to tank. If you want to heal, you can pick any of these classes to heal. So there's a lot of freedom in the way you create your character. Now, once you got your character created and all that good stuff, your race, your class, comes down to what kind of armor you want to wear. And that's, again, that all comes down to the freedom because you can wear any kind of armor you want. If you want to wear cloth armor with heavy plate armor, you can. If you want to wear all medium leather armor, you can. And these armors, they're going to give you certain passive bonuses for having so many equipped. Like if you got 3 pieces of heavy armor equipped, just for an example, I don't know if this is actually correct, but that's going to give you bonuses to health or physical resistance or things like that. And that's the cool thing about this game because you literally build your character how you want to. Now on to your weapon. You can have two weapons equipped. Um, there's a range of different weapons that you can use. You can dual wield sword and shield. You have bow. you have two-handed. So there's a lot of variety in, how you want your character to be. The next thing is picking your abilities. So all of these different trees have abilities that you can choose from. Each tree has 5 abilities. You can have a total of 10 abilities equipped at a time. And if you decide, you want all abilities just from your class itself, then you can do that. Now, if you want some two-handed abilities, you can level up your two-handed and get some abilities off from that tree. So that's one of the greatest assets that Elder Scrolls offers. Sometimes I think they do have a little bit of trouble when it comes to balance because you have so much freedom. People build all these meta builds and then they get gear sets. So sometimes things may be unbalanced. So there's a lot of class adjustments that I see that goes on in Elder Scrolls, but you can't knock the freedom. So that's the main thing there. So next, I want to touch on the combat. So Elder Scrolls uses a live action combat. You activate your moves. You have to actually, follow your opponent, hit your opponent. They use a live action combat, which is a little different versus Final Fantasy. Final Fantasy 14 is tab targeting, but the combat is very fluid. One thing that I will say about the combat that it lacks though is it's not flashy by any means. So don't expect to be blown away with some of the animations or the just the way the moves look. I feel like a lot of the moves have bare minimum aesthetics in my opinion and don't really look that good. But moving past the looks, you still have to time your blocks. You have dodge rolls. You have a lot of AOE circles that need to be avoided and things like that. So now that we got a little bit of the combat out of the way, a lot of the things that you will be doing in this game is questing. I did mention that before. Both of these games in general are very quest heavy, lore driven storyline MMOs. So you'll be doing a lot of quests. There are a lot of other things to actually do in the game as well. You do have dungeons. Dungeons are your four-man content. Um, you can really queue up for any role. One thing I want to touch on about the dungeons, though, is that sometimes because of the freedom that they give you when you create your character, you don't really feel valuable. And by that, you can have a tank in there that's healing himself and doesn't really need you as a healer. That's one of the only things that I find that's kind of a downfall is that, you can go into a dungeon and not really need a healer, unfortunately. But outside of dungeons, you have trials, which are 12-man raids. Those are said to be a lot harder where you need classes that are actually going to be dedicated healers and not so much of your hybrids. When you look past the PvE standpoint, you do have PvP. The game does offer PvP. You have instance PvP, so you'll have your team deathmatch, Crazy King, King of the Hill, Capture the Flag, those type of PvP matches that's there for you. And then outside of that, open world, there's no PvP in like the questing zones. However, there is a zone specifically for PvPing, which is called Cyrodiil, and this is where all three factions are going to fight against each other for basically control. This type of PvP is like a siege war, so you're going to be using a lot of ballistas and things like that to weaken the enemy forces. It's actually a really good time when you get into a good Cyrodiil server and everything is really active and chaotic. So that's a good thing there. So that's about it. I'm gonna wrap the gameplay up here. I know there's a lot more that I can go in depth, but don't want to make this video too long. So next we're gonna take a look at Final Fantasy XIV's gameplay, see where that stands. All right, so on to Final Fantasy XIV. When you boot up this game, create your first character, you're gonna get to choose from like 6 classes, something like that. I can't remember it right off the top of my head, but you'll quickly find out that there are like 17 total classes in this game. That's actually one of the bright spots for Final Fantasy. There's a ton of different classes. Now, one of the great things that Final Fantasy does is that it allows you to play every single class. Um, Unlike Elder Scrolls, where you have to create alts if you want to try out another class, Final Fantasy, it's more of just equipping a different weapon. Now, Final Fantasy does a great job with all of its classes, especially the balance. My hats go off to the devs because they've managed to balance their classes pretty much the same. I mean, they're just all really good. If one class slacks in one area, it's because they may have a special ability that buffs the party, for example, or something like that. So they do a really good job at adjusting the classes and getting them all on par with each other. So, like I said before, you can play all these classes in Final Fantasy. There's really no need to create a alternate character. If you want to switch your character, all you have to do is switch your main weapon. You just go get a main weapon of any class, swap it, then you're going to be that class. So you can start playing a paladin, and if you don't like that tanking class, you can just go swap and play a gunbreaker or a dark knight or whatever. There's no need to recreate a whole nother all go through all those quests again or anything like that. So great thing for them. One thing I do want to touch on is in the gameplay is the early game in Final Fantasy 14. I'll be honest with you guys, Final Fantasy 14 probably has the slowest early game of any MMO I've played. It's painfully slow, it's very boring. They don't give you a lot of abilities up front, so you're going to be using almost like a rotation of like five or six abilities until you basically hit like level 40. It's really slow in the beginning. I'm pretty sure a lot of people will tell you that. They are trying to rework the beginning of the game, not make it so quest heavy or anything like that. So that's one of my bad spots about the gameplay when it comes to Final Fantasy 14. Now, on to the combat. So, Final Fantasy does stick to a traditional tab targeting combat. So, you will be, swapping between targets a lot. But it's a very good system. It's very fluid. They have a lot of controls for people who play with a controller and mouse and keyboard. So, nothing really bad to say about the tab targeting. One of the good spots here, which I wasn't so high on with Elder Scrolls, is the animations. The fighting looks so good. It looks so cool. Big blast, great sword movement abilities. The combat feels so refreshing because the animations look so good. I'm one of those people, I get pleased by aesthetics. I'm very much in tune with my character. I like my character to look nice, look dope, look cool, and I expect my abilities to do the same. That's one of the things that I didn't find in Elder Scrolls. My character would look okay, he would look decent, but my animations, my abilities just they didn't have that oomph to them. I didn't feel like a badass or something. When I casted my abilities. You're definitely gonna get that with Final Fantasy 14. You might get too much animations to where you may have to turn it down just a little bit. So now that we kind of got the classes out the way, we got the combat. What will you be doing in Final Fantasy 14? Well, I'm gonna tell you right from the beginning, you will be doing a lot of quests. This is a good and a bad thing. Final Fantasy 14 has some of the best storytelling in an MMO that you will see. Them and Elder Scrolls have some of the best storytelling. But the difference is Elder Scrolls doesn't require you to do the storyline to get to the new content. Final Fantasy does. And there are a lot of quests in Final Fantasy. The developers are, I'm not sure if it's out yet, but they are working on a story crunch. So you don't have to do as many quests to reach the end game. That's like I said, it's a double edged sword because they want you to play this great storyline, but at the same time, that's a lot of time that you have to invest just to get to the new content. So my thing is, imagine a new expansion coming out, and you wanting to play that expansion, but you can't because you have to go through the base game Heaven Toward expansion, Stormblood expansion, Shadowbringers expansion, all of that story just to get to the new content, which I'm not that big of a fan of. Now, they do offer storyline skips, which will get you to right now level, I believe it's 70. But at that point, if you're a new player, you don't know nothing about the game, you don't know nothing about the dungeons, you don't know how to use your class. So I don't necessarily recommend it. And that's one of the bad things that I feel about, when it comes to the storyline. Now, you have dungeons, which is 4-man content. The dungeons are very good in this game. Some of the best dungeons that I've ever run. You still have all your typical mechanics, telegraphs on the ground that you have to get out of, certain mechanics that you may have to figure out when fighting the boss. Also, you got raids, which are 24-man content, and they split you up into 3 groups of 8, and you do your raid. You also have trials, which are boss fights. You just go in there for a boss fight. They have different versions of the boss fight. So you have like hard mode, then you got extreme. So it keeps on challenging, the player with harder difficulties and extra mechanics to each boss fight. Now, if you're taking a step away from PvE, you do have PvP in this game, but I'm gonna be honest with you guys. PvP here is an afterthought. It's nowhere near close to its PvE counterpart. They strip you basically of all your abilities and only give you like 6 abilities to use. This is a game that you can tell PvP is not a focus whatsoever. At least in Elder Scrolls, PvP there is very competitive, and the devs put a lot of work into their PvP, as well as their PvP. Final Fantasy, not so much. So that's about it for the gameplay. Next, I'm just going to give you guys my personal take on both of these games. Maybe let you guys know what I play, and let's go ahead and start wrapping this up. So let's get to it. All right, so what's my take on both of these games? Let me make this statement first. These 2 games are 2 of the most popular MMOs out right now that are currently being played, and that's for a reason. Both of these games are very good in their respective rights. I feel like Final Fantasy does some things better. Elder Scrolls does some things better. I think it all just comes down to a matter of preference. What do you look for in an MMO? One thing that I can say about Final Fantasy is the game feels very polished. There's not a lot of bugs. There's, none of that type of stuff. When I turn on Elder Scrolls, I get a lot of bugs. I feel the NPCs are invisible. My weapon is glitching. A lot of things like that. But at the same time, when I'm wandering around the world in Elder Scrolls, I feel more attached to the environment. The game feels more alive. Final Fantasy, not so much. The world is empty. There's a lot of space. There's nothing just but enemies in the world. That's it. No NPCs going on. And for me, I'll let you guys know that I have spent more time playing Final Fantasy XIV. But I don't think it's the better MMO. I think if you're talking total package, I think Elder Scrolls Online has more to offer than Final Fantasy XIV. And I say that because in Final Fantasy XIV, if you're not grinding dungeons over and over and over again, or doing a trial over and over and over again, there's really nothing else for you to do. There's nothing in the outside world for you to do, maybe except a little bit of gathering, but that's about it. They don't give you a lot of extracurricular activities to go do. Like I said, PvP is an afterthought. In Elder Scrolls, if I want to, I can run dungeons over and over and over again, or trials, or I can go complete the various mini zones that there are, collect all the collectibles, fight all the world bosses, things like that. I feel like those are some of the things that I'm missing in Final Fantasy. But it's just something about Final Fantasy that I like to play that game a little bit more. For me, the boss fights are epic. One thing that I didn't mention earlier is the music. the music in Final Fantasy is amazing. When you get to that boss fight and that music cues, man, man, turn the radio up. You know what I mean? Like that's what I love. I love the aesthetic of Final Fantasy. I love the way it looks. And I've played a lot of Elder Scrolls as well, but I just don't get those things. I don't get that, oh man, it's a big boss fight feeling from the game. The music is okay, but it just doesn't get me pumped. You know, like have you ever been driving in your car and that song come on and it just change your driving habits? Like that's what I get in Final Fantasy. Not so much with Elder Scrolls, but that's not to say Final Fantasy is a worse game because I think Elder Scrolls is better. It's just whatever you're looking for. Both of these games are incredible MMOs, and I think you know whether you pick one or the other, you're still winning at the end of the day. So that's what I wanted to say about that. But I really want to know, which one do you guys play? If you guys have been playing both of these games, which one do you prefer and why? I want y'all to drop something in the comments for me, letting me know. Like I said, I'm a big fan of both of these games. So I just want to hear from y'all, man. What do y'all like? But that's about it from me, man. I hope you guys enjoyed this versus video. I hope it helped. If it did, you know, leave that thumbs up. If you want to subscribe, support the channel, definitely hit that subscribe button. If you don't, that's okay. I appreciate you checking me out anyway. But I'll catch you guys next time. Holy Ghost out.